Now, I gave you a few minutes and to put down in there who you think is involved in a case. And now let's look at who participates in a case or who's involved. So you'll find there's actually a lot of people that get involved in a child needed care case. You have everyone from the child, their parents or caretakers or guardians, anybody named in the petition that takes care of that child, grandparents, attorneys for the CASA program or the child, the guardian ad litem, the judge, the St. Francis TFI adoption team, so they're caseworker teams because DCF subcontracts with local agencies. Local agencies in our jurisdiction are St. Francis, TFI, that sort of thing. We have DCF, we have attorneys for the parents, we could have volunteer advocates, we could have family advocacy programs, caseworkers, Indian Child's Tribe, if this is a child that is an Indian child that fits under the ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act stipulations, interpreters, witnesses. There's so many people that get involved in these cases that it is almost like who isn't involved in some cases. So there's a lot of different people that can be involved in this case, and that can be overwhelming for the parents. Keep this in mind. We're not trying to overwhelm them, but there's a lot of people that get involved in these cases. The great thing is when we as CASAs know that we come into this with best interest of the child over everything. Keeps everything really clear for us. So what will you be doing in particular? Well, there are 4 basic parameters of your role as a CASA volunteer advocate, and that is information gathering. You're going to be checking current background facts. You're not trying to find out whether a crime has occurred or not, or what happened, so much as what's going on now. Are people following, and this is where we get into monitoring, are parents and children and workers and everyone following the court orders? Facilitating information. Hey, you just saw something in you saw the parents and they shared that they had finished a parenting class, and then they showed you that certificate, and then when you give it to us, we'll make sure that St. Francis gets it so that everybody gets it. We'll make sure the judge gets it. We facilitate information. I have to be honest, we have very few caseworkers or social workers assigned to these cases. They have a lot of cases, despite the recent legislation and laws in Kansas that changed that have a max caseload. Unfortunately, they are still very overworked and understaffed as social workers in our area. And therefore, they don't have the opportunity to meet with the parents and the families as much as you will as a CASA volunteer advocate. If they're removed from the home, whoever their placement is, if it's in the foster care system, will obviously know that child extraordinarily well. Typically, who knows them second best in this situation from the professional side are you as the CASA volunteer advocate, because we do a one case, or one sibling group to one volunteer. Other than extreme circumstances, you'll only have that one family that you're working with, so you get to know them all really, really well. Because of that, parents often feel much more trust. They feel more comfortable and they trust their CASA advocate more, and so sometimes they'll be more willing to share information with you that we can then facilitate to assist the families. And then advocacy, that's what you write in your court reports. That's how you make specific recommendations for the best interest of the child, whether the recommendations involve mom, dad, grandparents, the child themselves, whatever. So I'm going to, as quickly as I can, go through some of the differences between the social worker and the CASA advocate. We always want to do this comparison of primary responsibilities because it can be so different, but at the same time seem very similar. Okay, so the social worker is going to gather information and they make decisions on day-to-day casework issues. Whereas the CASA advocate gathers information and we make recommendations to the court on day-to-day casework issues. They make the decisions and make it happen for appointments and doctors and things like that. We make recommendations as to what we think is best interest of the child. The social worker will gather information. They share that information with the clients, with the CASA advocates or the CASA staff, attorneys, and the court. They also share it with foster parents, placement, kinship placements, etc. We gather information. We share it obviously with our CASA staff, the court, social workers, and attorneys. You'll notice we are not updating the foster workers. We're not updating the parents. The parents get updates from their attorneys. The foster parents get updates from from the social workers themselves. That is not our place. Okay. Social workers review and evaluate information. They do an agency review. We do an independent review. We are a third party. We are not tied to any one thing other than the best interest of the child. So we come in there with an independent review and evaluation of information. The social workers will often assist the county attorney's office in writing these child in need of care petitions. We are not appointed until after that SYNC petition has been filed. The social worker presents evidence to support allegations in the SYNC petition, and they have the burden of proof because they help form that petition, whereas we just are looking at straight factual information regarding the child and family situation. This may or may not support the allegations in the SYNC petition. Basically, they have to look and advocate and work for the entire family and their rules and regulations. We are just looking at the facts, and we may be in disagreement with those social workers. The social workers provide services directly, and they would pay for those services. We recommend services. We do not pay for services at all. It is not our job to provide anything from a materialistic or monetary point for the children. In fact, I will tell you that our program has a limit of $50 per year that you can spend on your CASA child. So pretty much if you think about it, like you get them a birthday present, or you can get them a present for Christmas or the end of the year holiday season or whatnot, or you could do something like that, but it can't total more than $50 per year. The social worker has the goal of reuniting the child with a custodial parent, provided that the child's safety can be assured. Our goal is to always represent the best interests of the child. Sometimes returning home is not in their best interest. The majority of the time it is, but not all the time. The social worker must represent the established public policy and agency directives, whereas we only represent the best interests of the individual child, and we are not bound by public policy. For instance, remember back to that case where we haven't been able to find the family, that 2-year-old and their family, and we're at 6 months in, and we haven't contacted the parents because we haven't been able to find the parents. Well, if those parents all of a sudden pop up 8 months into the case, so they haven't had any contact with their child for 8 months, and they completely abandoned them, and they were like, yeah, well, we figured they were fine, and we decided we were going to go take a trip across the nation. That social worker still has the obligation to try and reunite that family. We don't have such an obligation. We might say, look, hey, are you guys thinking you do it again? Yeah, we might do it again, but they're bigger now. They can take care of themselves. And we'd be like, and maybe we need to rethink about whether reintegration is really in that child's best interest or not, and see how we would have different opinions for different reasons. Even if I have had social workers come to us and they will say, is your CASA advocate considering, this? We know that this is what the child needs, but because of our policies and procedures, we can't recommend it yet. However, if they recommend it, we will not object. And so the social workers, my heart goes out to them when they're in those tough positions where what they know is the best thing to do is not what they're legally allowed by their policies and procedures to do. So that's why it is a big difference between the two of us. The social worker is responsible for monitoring the child's, the parent, and the parent's compliance with court orders. You'll notice that we are responsible for monitoring the social worker's child's and parents' compliance with court orders. And so I'm going to tell you a story about a social worker who is no longer a social worker. Mostly because they absolutely did not follow court orders. At this point in time, we had a case where the child's parents had parenting time, visitation time, family time, what you want to call it, but it had to be 100% supervised by the agencies. There were some significant physical and emotional abuse that happened, and so they had to be supervised throughout all for the family time. And what ended up happening was the then social worker, the no longer social worker, let the parent take the child out of the office, brought them to a movie theater, then took them out to eat, and no staff went with them, no social worker went with them to supervise properly. Unfortunately, we had to report this. The child was very upset by this. They were afraid. Parent had threatened them while all this was going on, and when they shared this with a volunteer, we of course we verified the information, and then we had to include it in the court report. And that's one of the reasons why we were kind of monitoring, hey, they didn't do supervised visitation. That is one of the many reasons why that person is no longer a social worker anymore. That is not the only poor choice that they made, and that negatively impacted their career. One of the things we want to talk about is the social worker can request a judicial review of the case, but also the CASA advocate can request a judicial review of the case. And all that means is you are asking the judge, who's kind of already read through everything once and then they keep up to date with the new stuff, to go back to the very beginning of the case and reread everything. Now, this is typically done by the attorneys when we're in a trial type setting for one of those things like the adjudication or termination of parental rights, that motion for a finding of unfitness or something like that, because there's a lot in the history and we don't want, like, you can't remember everything, right?